One of the biggest lies that creative people tell themselves is that their first project has to be their big break. It doesn't. Sometimes it just needs to exist. And putting that much pressure on yourself is one of the fastest ways to ensure that perfectionism completely halts any and all progress that you could have made. When I made Hysterical Women, I did not know all of the things that I know now. I wasn't fully confident, I wasn't fully ready, and honestly, it is not the best thing that I will ever make. But it changed my entire life and career anyway, because that project became a building block. It taught me not only how to create, but how to lead, how to trust my voice, how to stop waiting for permission, and ultimately how to overcome perfectionism. And now I see so many creatives getting in their own way and using perfectionism as an excuse to get started. And I'll be so for real, I would not be where I am today if I had let perfectionism talk me out of it back then. So in this episode, I'm going to break down not just how I made Hysterical Women the pilot, but also why making imperfect work on purpose and allowing that to be seen can become one of the most career-defining things that you ever do. In my last video, I talked about how I made this independent pilot, Hysterical Women, back in 2018. After I made it, I submitted it to all the festivals, it won awards, I got signed by top Hollywood agents, but then I hid it for years. And I didn't hide it because there was no value in it. I hid it for two reasons. One is that I was afraid of being seen, and two is that everyone in the industry wanted a part of it. In Hollywood, everyone wants to be the second person to bet on you. No one wants to be the first. So once I started winning awards and getting traction, then of course, the gatekeepers, the agencies, the managers, the development deals, the general meetings, like all of those things started to happen because people finally had something that they could look at and say, oh, this girl actually is talented. And the truth is that was the intention of this project, was to get attention from gatekeepers and take my career to the next level. And honestly, it could have been a good strategy, except I don't know if y'all remember the great old pandemic, but yeah, that kind of came and crashed and burned everything. So 2018, I made it. 2019, we took it around to the festival circuit. Early 2020 was when I signed with agencies, got a development deal, wrote on a movie starring Lucy Hale, started to like really pick up traction in not only my acting, but also my writing and directing career. And then it kind of all just completely fell apart. My agents got furloughed. The agency eventually shut down. The development deal completely collapsed. And I felt like I was ultimately starting back at square one. Even though I had this amazing asset that the industry had said, like, yes, we believe in this, I wasn't ready to share it yet. I wasn't ready for it to be seen. But let's go back, because the important thing is that I still made it, right? And truthfully, this is some of the nuance, because sometimes you have to create because you're never actually going to feel ready to start becoming visible. So often I see my clients come to me and they're excited. They have an idea that they're really inspired by and they want to get going on, but they're waiting until they feel ready, till they feel calm, till they feel confident. And the truth is that might not come until you make it. But even though I wasn't ready to share this online, it still became evidence of the person that I was becoming. And it signaled not only to audiences, but also to myself, like, oh yeah, she is who she thinks she is. And I think that that was really important in my self-concept at the time. It was kind of like I was becoming that person in the background and building confidence, because ultimately confidence is an emotion and emotions come from our thoughts, right? So you can think thoughts that make you feel confident, but it's going to be so much easier when you actually have the chops to back it up. When you can point to your work and say like, no, this is really good. I have a clear vision, I have clear talent, and I've put in the time and effort and the work to actually stand for myself. So even though I wasn't fully ready to share this project until now, it did build my resilience and build my capacity to be seen. So today I want to talk about the part that matters just as much as visibility, and that is the fact that I made this thing at all. So let's go back. At this point, I had made my web series, Jessica. I had done some short films and I had acted on set, and honestly I had also worked in almost every capacity. I worked as a PA, as a gaffer, as an electrician at weird times. I'd done wardrobe, I'd done set design. I really had put in the time to learn and understand the ecosystem of a set. I think that was a really important backbone of what I created, because there was the part of me that thought that at least could see the vision for how all of these pieces could come together. But I had not produced yet at this scale. I had never really worked with budgets. And I ultimately just remember my co-creator, Nora, and I like kind of just using beginner's luck and deciding that we would just figure it out as we went. Ultimately, I decided to just learn by doing. And it's funny because I remember having this book that was just like gathering dust on my bookshelf, and it was how to produce films. And I made Hysterical Women. And then when I was ready to make my first feature film, The Cosmo Sisters, I was like, you know what? Maybe I should go back and read that book. And when I went back and read it, I realized I'd already learned all of the lessons in it. I think so often I see clients get stuck in what I call like being like a research cat, which is when you're like constantly waiting to consume more information or talk to another guru or listen to another podcast and thinking that a new amount of information will make you feel ready. But again, you're not going to feel ready. You just have to decide that it's time to get started and decide that you're willing to be misunderstood and willing to look like a complete idiot as you're figuring it out. I learned it through trial and error, doing it the hard way. Learning on the ground, like really just putting yourself in the arena, is the fastest way to learn anyway. It's going to give you access and confidence to get into rooms that you normally couldn't otherwise. I always teach people that you have to earn the right to inspire people. And I think that stepping out as a leader before you necessarily feel fully ready is how you do that. Ultimately, I just had an idea. And I actually remember when I had the idea for Hysterical Women, I was like, just finished a workout class. And this was right when everything around the Me Too movement was starting to come out. And originally the premise for this was, okay, what if post Me Too, all of the men get fired and the women are left to run the company? Then what happens? That was like the original idea, which obviously if you've watched it, it kind of took a departure from that as we went through the process. I remember as we were going through figuring it out, the very first table read that we ever had for it. So I had this idea and it inspired me. And ultimately it was a role that I really wanted to play, which was a scrappy startup founder who was constantly underestimated. And that compelling reason is why I continued going on it. I say all this to share that I think so many creators are waiting until they feel certain in order to take action. But the truth is the certainty comes as you take action. The original idea that you have for something is not going to be the end product. I remember one of my mentors, Tony Spiridakis, saying that when you have a creative project, you kind of have to think of it like a child where, you know, you have hopes and dreams and ambitions for the child, but ultimately it's your job as a parent to guide them to become who they are meant to be. And I think about that a lot now when I'm writing is I ultimately am just the vessel for stories to come through. And sometimes, especially when we add on collaborators, they take on a life of their own. And I think that that is a beautiful part of the creative process, but it's never going to happen if you are waiting to feel like it's perfectly molded in order to get started. And yeah, it was like super embarrassing doing this table read where basically every actor was like, this is chaotic. Like it is embarrassing to put your work out there. And I think that's unfortunately or fortunately the price of admission to success in the spotlight. Ultimately, I only get to access the version of me right now because I was willing to make and allow people to see something from an earlier level of skill, confidence, and strategy and identity. And that's exactly what I'm talking about when I say that you have to start making B- work. It's so that you can become the version of you who is ready and willing to be seen. You don't become your celebrity self by waiting to feel like them. You become her by making the projects that she would make. So let's talk a little bit more about perfectionism, because perfectionism can sound really sneaky and you can almost trick yourself into thinking that it's your wisdom speaking. But if you really get down to the root of it, perfectionism is just the fear of being judged by others, the fear of failing publicly, or often the fear that you're actually not as good as you hoped. And I remember that feeling. I always say that when I get into the editing bay with a project, it kind of feels like you're looking at like a macaroni necklace that like a child made, where you're looking at all these pieces and you're like, that's great, but like, is this good at all? And that part, like I'm dealing with this right now as I'm editing my next project, where I'm looking at it and seeing just these little pieces and they haven't fully come together. Because they haven't, it feels like that macaroni necklace and it kind of feels embarrassing and cringe and honestly makes me want to stop. I think as creatives, one of our biggest assets is our taste. And it's really challenging when you don't feel like the work that you're making matches your level of taste. But if I had required Hysterical Women to be the best thing that I ever made, then I never would have finished it. The standard for that season of my life was not up to make a masterpiece. The standard was just to make the thing. And truthfully, I think that's a lesson that we all need, and I need to be reminded of myself. This can get harder the more visibility you have, because you're not only competing with past versions of yourself, but there's also an expectation, and people are looking at you. You have more eyeballs on you. And I think that can be really daunting. But the work always, no matter what level you are at, is just to make the thing, to keep showing up for it every single day, take step by step, break it down, to be willing to be embarrassed, to be willing for it to look bad, to be willing for it to flop, and just to get it across the finish line. There are seasons in your life where your job is not to optimize. Your job is just to build evidence, self-trust, and momentum. Imperfect work can still change your life, can change your career, and more importantly, can completely up-level your self-concept. This pilot, Hysterical Women, taught me how to make something real, to take my vision and bring all the pieces together and create a machine where we were all working in unison and to actually deliver a product. It taught me how to move from ideas to execution. It taught me how to direct actors, to work with production, to tell stories, to set tones, to create a budget. All the things that I didn't learn in theater school that now have made me this insane triple threat where I, in theory, can do all of the things. Ultimately, Hysterical Women gave me evidence that I could carry a creative vision, especially if I was supported by the right people. Filmmaking is such a group sport, and I remember there being a time when I was an actor just feeling so frustrated and stuck because I wanted to act, but I felt like I had to wait on other people. And I think Hysterical Women was the first time that I really was able to have that whole team supporting me. But that was also built brick by brick. It started with my web series, Jessica, that I shot on my iPhone with just one other actor friend, Brian Russell Carey, who was crazy enough to get on board with me. And then it continued to grow. And even if a project is not its final form, it can still reveal your voice. Creating, whether it was Jessica or Hysterical Women, showed me the types of themes and stories and characters that I was already naturally drawn to. I didn't realize that I already had a voice, but the more I continued to show up and make things and tell stories, the easier it was to see through lines in my work and in my voice. Themes like female ambition, identity, leadership, power, visibility, all building blocks of exactly what I teach and create now. And looking back now, I can see how the seeds of this current How to Be Famous brand were planted through Hysterical Women. Having a really clear voice as a creative is ultimately your biggest asset. Once you have a clear voice, then you can leverage it into all types of IP, right? I obviously have a coaching business built around my voice. I'm also writing a book. I'm writing series. I'm acting in projects, all things that are told through this lens and through this voice that, again, I would not have developed if I wasn't willing to be seen imperfectly. Now, this is exactly why I teach that visibility is not a content problem. So many people are waiting for the perfect idea, the perfect strategy, the perfect team, and even bigger, the perfect version of themselves. But the very first step, the real true shift that you have to make is, can you tolerate being a beginner in public? Can you let your work be seen before it feels airtight? Your fame and opportunity will grow as you increase your ability to be perceived. And your next level is typically going to come from showing your previous body of work. The body of work that proves that you are serious, that you have a voice, that you have a strong point of view, that you are someone worth following. Not that the project proves that you are somehow flawless. Making something before you feel fully ready is the exact way that you expand your nervous system to be seen at a bigger scale. Now, sometimes emotions can completely shut you down. I know as creatives, our biggest strength can be our emotions, which when they go into overdrive can become our biggest weaknesses, which is why it is so important to regulate through all of this process. And one of the best ways to regulate your nervous system to higher levels of visibility is to put yourself in community with like-minded people who are already doing the exact same thing. They say you're an average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with, and I can tell exactly how famous you are going to be based on those 5 people in your life. So if you don't already have a community of artists, creatives, influencers, entrepreneurs who are creating the resource of fame and normalizing visibility, normalizing B- work and putting themselves out there, then you have to get inside of my group, the Celebrity Circle. This is my monthly membership program where we give you the tools and the strategies to actually create and scale your consciousness so that you can become famous. Which leads me to the Celebrity Circle segment. Now, this is the segment where I answer the questions that were submitted inside of the Celebrity Circle. So if you want your questions answered, then make sure to get your booty in there and I will answer them here. Okay, Marla says, I feel like I'm doing everything right. I'm posting, creating, showing up, but nothing is popping off. How do I know if I'm actually talented or if I'm just delusional? Okay, so let's break down what talent even is, because as I mentioned earlier, talent ultimately is the ability to execute your vision and your point of view and bring it into the world. And the truth is, the only way that you're going to get better at that is by getting a bunch of reps in. One of our coaches inside of How to Be Famous, Alex, he always says, if you knew that you were going to get 100 fails in before you got your first success, then how quickly would you go after those first 100 fails, right? I personally always like to use the 100 mark. I've used this for all different areas of my life, whether it's I'm going to send 100 pitches, I'm going to submit 100 auditions, I'm going to post 100 different times. Oftentimes, and I don't know exactly where this is at, but when you're having the thought, I feel like I'm doing everything right, we really have to look at the data and say, okay, you feel like you're doing everything right, but how many reps are you actually getting in? So that's part number one. Part number two with this is, if you're talented or just delusional, is that I feel like I've been in this industry long enough to have seen firsthand that even the people that we think are the most talented, there's nothing inherently special or magical about them. Like, they really are just humans. And I've seen this when I'm coaching celebrities who I promise you have looked at and been like, but that person is a mega star, unicorn, whatever. No, trust me, they still like get up for breakfast and need their coffee. They still get insecure looking at pictures of themselves. They still have family drama. And I think that sometimes it can be a cop out to say like, oh, what if I'm not talented enough? Or what if I'm just delusional? Because the truth is, if you believe that you have to be chosen or special or otherwise you're just delusional, it gives your brain an out. So instead, I would encourage you to focus on getting those reps in, failing at least 100 times, and deciding that this is a reality that is within your control to make, right? I think that's what can become so elusive, is when we think that people are just talented or just like born with it or just lucky, it gives us an excuse for why we can't have it. Just like how if we believe that only special people could lose weight or make money, then it would just give us an out so that we didn't have to do those things too. But if you fully believe that becoming famous is in your control, then how quickly would you get those reps in? If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to like and subscribe so that you don't miss another episode. Thank you so much for being here. And remember, if you want your questions answered on this show, make sure to join us inside of the Celebrity Circle. I'll see you there. Bye.